So Stan Golakowski, I am the executive director for the Yavapai County Schools Superintendent.
Okay.
And you're probably asking yourself, why is a schools guy coming up here and talk about broadband? The background behind this is about 3 years ago, we used federal funding through the E-rate program. And E-rate is a federally funded program through the Federal Corporation Commission, or Communications Commission, excuse me. And they give a percentage of all.
Can I interrupt
Sure.
you for a second? I know you have a PowerPoint. Do you mind being over here and moving your PowerPoint?
Drive that way. You bet. Oh, great. Yep.
Thanks, man. I'm sorry about
Oh, not a problem. So through E-rate, schools and libraries can receive a reimbursement based off of their free and reduced lunch rate. In many cases throughout Yavapai County, it's right around 80 to 90% that they receive back. And it comes from everybody's phone bill and also now your cell phone bills. So it was wired and now it's wireless. And so, it's a great situation for schools and libraries. When this project and the funding became available, our county jumped on it because we deal with E-rate. We actually have a consultant in our office, and we consolidated an effort in order to help out all of our smaller communities, right? So the Yarnells, the Bagdads, the Crown Kings in particular, because no broadband provider would go out to these locations because it just didn't pencil out as far as the funding is concerned. So by creating a consolidated effort, we could use the size of Prescott Valleys, and Cottonwoods to get them the broadband, and through doing so, we reduce the rate. So when the ARPA money, the American Relief Plan Act funding came about, and I know you received a portion, the county received a significant portion, about $43 million. You could use it towards infrastructure, and broadband was part of that. Our county administrators asked us, what exactly did you do with the schools and libraries to get broadband out? And if you were to get it out to all the residents and the businesses in the county, how would you go about doing it? So we put together a proposal and gave it to our Board of Supervisors. The result of this was the Board of Supervisors allocating $20 million of their ARPA funds towards broadband. So what I'm going to present to you today is just kind of the overall plan and how we're going to go about this, and ask something of you, because we really need your population, the number of businesses, to help with the leveraging of all this. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. Not only that, I'm also going to talk about what the middle mile is versus the final mile, and because this is truly a final mile project, how we're going to do it, the timeline in which we're going to accomplish it, and then what we received as far as guidance from our Board of Supervisors. If you were to look at the FCC map on broadband, it paints a pretty cherry picture, honestly. But what this shows is a number of different providers of broadband throughout the county that can deliver whatever broadband at different speeds. We know a majority of this is actually satellites, and through satellite, that really is not an effective means to get high-speed broadband. And in our more remote locations, internet can really limp along, and you don't really have the speeds that you need to have. This is a more accurate picture, a little more bleak. What it really shows is there's really only one provider that provides what's considered significant broadband, and that's 100 megabits per second up and 25 megabits down. It's still not very fast, but if you were to look at it all across the county, we only 3% of the county receives the speeds at what the national level says is a minimum requirement of what a speed is for you to stream, to do all the things that we do today with the internet. So 3%. We know that there's places downtown that even the Chamber of Commerce, they can't effectively Zoom from their office. And so what we're finding out is those legacy lines that have been put in place have not been brought up to speed. In newer communities and newer locations, yeah, you can get more significant speeds, but they are in pockets. So the ARPA funds, the way that they're directed is they can only be allocated towards underserved or unserved populations. So we know that at 97% of our county is underserved. This kind of paints the national picture, and this is why we are getting national funds towards this. Even across, even in your northern states and the more populated states, they get significant broadband, but it's still not where it needs to be. So under our project 3 years ago, these are the locations that we put in fiber lines to our schools and libraries. Now, school and library are what's considered anchor institutions, right? So in some communities, that may be the only thing that's in that community. So by leveraging the school or the library in that location, we put out an RFP that many different internet service providers came back to us and they said, hey, here's all the locations that we're going to reach. But they also saw it as an opportunity to run a pipe, run that through the conduit and build out fiber lines to those communities at a greater capacity than what the school needed. Very smart of them. But still, the residents, the lines would then have to spider web off to those residences and those businesses, and it would come at a cost. And if a provider were to do that, they have to figure out what that cost-benefit analysis is and how much can they recover from the lines that they have to push out. Well, they were always hoping that there would be something that would come about that would help fund this. And now there's this national funding that's come down to us in order to push those lines out to all the residences and businesses. The bottom bullet that we found the biggest benefit in our most populated areas, like the PUSDs, the HUSDs, the Cottonwood Unifieds, is, yeah, they may have already had broadband that was working okay, but their price reduced by 87% of what they were paying. What that did is it not only lowered that price, but it allowed the schools to then increase their broadband significantly for the same price, if not lower, and also to improve their internal network. Because now there is a significant price reduction on it. We did all this for $1.7 million from the FCC, and the company that was awarded the RFP was Sparklight in this case. They kicked in another $1.3 million because they saw an opportunity not only to get in these areas, but they're going to recoup those costs a lot faster because $1.7 million has been put in for the overall build, and they're accumulating costs from the customer. So that is our total plan. Our total plan does just that, but for the final mile. This is what, when we look back at this, we've now, through our schools and libraries, we've built the middle mile. We're the only county in the state that has the middle mile established. All our other counties are trying to establish this middle mile first. So we know we need to get in the final mile faster than anybody else because there's supply line issues. There's only so much fiber that's even available right now. And the state and anyone you talk to wants to be able to show a quick win. And by connecting to customers, that's a quick win. And they're saying rural Arizona has now done this. So that's the angle we're going off of, and that's why we're coming to you for a partnership. This is a schematic that really shows what I've talked about. And if you look at the schools/libraries at what's referred to as a local convergence point, that is the point where the rest, that final mile, feeds off of. So I use the term spider web, but the rest of those lines then go to those businesses, they go to the residences, they go to those neighborhoods. And And that's what we've gone to an RFP that started on November 13th and will end on December 2nd. And we're getting bids from national level companies to come to this because it is a big project, statewide and national companies. So on December, right after December 2nd, then we'll get a better idea of what the full plan is. Excuse me. So the total population that we're hoping to reach is the population of the county, which is over 235,000. And those are a number of housing units at over 120,000. We're looking at over 6,000 employee establishments. And if you look at it, Jerome was a proof of concept of what we're doing. We actually ran a line through APS poles of broadband up the mountain into their library. Since then, their municipality building, their police station, and all their public works buildings have fed off of that line from the library. And then Sparklight opened it up for the businesses, and 13 businesses now have contracts with Sparklight. So we know that we can do that using federal funding. So that was one hurdle that we just weren't sure of, and we know now we can do that. So, excuse me. So the point about leverage, this depiction here, the green circle shows all of the 9 municipalities that received ARPA funds for your infrastructure. The red circles are the very remote places that we're going to reach through the county. But as I said before, it all has to do with leverage. The more customers that we bring to the table for the internet service provider, the better our dollars decrease, right? So meaning that the cost benefit of that is an economy of scale issue. We really can't reach these locations unless we have that population. So the county has kicked in about 43% of their total ARPA funds. What we're asking under this is a 20% buy-in, if you will, to leverage the $20 million that the county has kicked in, and then your 20% to be a part of this to reach your significant population. So under this, the Board of Supervisors has approved a 20%, to come out and ask for 20% of what you received in ARPA funds. And for Prescott, that would be $1.184 million. And we've gone around every single municipality. We haven't talked to Prescott Valley's council yet. We have talked to their staff, but everybody so far is on board. Clarkdale's kind of on the fence. We're waiting to hear from them. But we're not coming to you for a decision today at all. We're just saying, hey, this is what we're doing. And the devil's going to be in the details. We're going to work with your city attorney, with our county attorneys, come up with an agreement, and then that'll be presented to you. Probably in late December, early January is what we're looking at. And that was a whole bunch of information, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Stan. Good presentation. Thank you for your work on this. It's good stuff for our county. We'll go to questions, comments from the council. Councilmember Rusing.
Thank you. I would like to talk about how important broadband is to telehealth and telemedicine. As you know, we're a rural community, and if we had broadband, more people in rural areas could be monitored, especially in this time of COVID, and they could stay home, and it would prevent too many people being in the hospital at the same time, and would also not only help with preventative care, for example, in diabetes, but also for early intervention. and to monitor people at home and keep them from getting critically ill before they seek help. And it's also important to have broadband for the emergency services too. So I would just like to present that point of view. And it's also, as you said, important for distance learning and Zooming. And that there's also, it can be fiber optics, wireless, cable, DSL, and satellite too. So it's exciting technology. And one thing I just would like to talk about for a minute is radio frequency interference. We have to be mindful of the airport and any effects, maybe do a study or something, any potential effects on our airport services. Thank you.
Yeah, could I comment on that, the radio frequency? So our intent is to do as much fixed fiber as possible. I mean, fiber is the king in all this. There will be places that we'll have to do some what's called licensed fixed wireless. And the way the technology has occurred in the last 18 months, the U.S. Navy had a band, a frequency on the band that just got released that they weren't using. They've used it for over 30 years. And in order for a company for broadband to receive a licensed wireless account, if you will, on this band, they obviously have to apply for it, but it doesn't interfere with any other wireless means that are out there. That's getting so bogged down. This one band is going to be so restricted, and that's what the broadband on a fixed wire would do. So again, the technology is really advanced. It's not going to bleed into, from what we understand, this technology. And you're not going to see big towers. You're not going to see anything like that. The actual wireless repeater, if you will, is not very big. It goes up on a pole about the size of a flagpole, and for if there's line of sight, it can cover up to 12 miles radius. So that's kind of what we're dealing with right now.
Thank you.
Councilman Tenney.
So Councilmember Rusing pointed out some really excellent reasons why this could be really critical in a lot of our rural parts of Yavapai County. If there's a constituent in Prescott, say a small business owner or some husband and wife in their house, and they know that we're at some point considering contributing $1.184 million to this, what's a good, give me the 30-second elevator speech of what they have now versus what they might have later if Prescott contributes to this and it all comes together in the best way possible.
Right. So this is specifically to tackle, address the lack of high-speed broadband, that it doesn't have latency, so any drop issues, and for a lower price.
Super. Well, I know on the school level, it's been super for Prescott Unified to be able to have access to the greater internet speeds. As we went to distance learning, we found that a lot of our kids did not have that, and it was just super unhelpful for just one of the two parties that needed it to have it. So Councilmember Russo made some excellent references to that already. Thank you.
Other questions, comments from the council?
I got a couple, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Assuming that this funding and this project is approved and launched, how long do you think it would take, or you expect it to be able to have this completed? Are there any consequences, like the American Recovery Act requirements that these projects be planned, implemented, and completed? Otherwise, there's penalties or consequences. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, excellent question. I didn't go over the timeline. I apologize, but it is an 18-month timeline that's from when we award the RFP. So we look at it December, so 18 months from there, where we're going to reach all those places that are on the red circles and the green circles that we showed up there. There will be some locations that are a little bit more difficult to get to, so we didn't address them, but we reserved about 6 months to reach those places that are more difficult. The ARPA funds are very restrictive, and there's a lot of detail that goes into it. The money that you have, we don't want to touch any of the money. What we've stated in the RFP is there's going to be requirements for reporting. We're going, as project managers, we'd be responsible for providing that information for the reporting. We wouldn't touch your money. The city would actually pay the vendor and then give the reports as you would with any other ARPA report for water or sewer, whatever you might have. You would just stay on board and to ensure that you are adhering to your requirements for your money. Because if it comes to us, there's just a little bit more steps that would be involved. We just don't want any issues with that. And then we'll pay the $20 million the same way. We'd be on the same timeline. We're still reporting on the $20 million, but we would ensure as a project manager that all those procedures go through on time and reported the way that they're supposed to be reported. Does that answer your full question?
So each one of these members, Sedona, Camp Verde, Clarkdale, etc., they would all be paying their prorated share to Sparklight.
If that's who receives the RFP, right? It wouldn't be Sparklight in particular. We won't know until it's awarded. Yeah.
So are there other providers that you think are likely to bid on this?
Oh, yeah.
It would be a complete system-wide award, not broken up into different areas of different providers.
Yeah, if it's broken up into different providers, we lose that leverage. We don't, if we're dealing with 8 different entities, then, if there's something that goes down, they can point fingers, they can point, there's just a lot of issues with that. The ideal situation is if one vendor comes through and we have vendors that have filed an intent to bid. I believe we have 6 right now. But that doesn't mean that someone else might still come in with another bid because it was an option to actually say that there was an intent to bid. So, but from what we understand, these companies, this is what they do. They do big projects and they put in wireless plus fiber, so throughout the country.
So since it's a blanket 20% calculation, how can we be assured that the residents of Prescott are going to be able to get a return on this $1.184 million allocation or contribution? Yeah,
I mean the details of what whoever comes to the table with their plan, the weighted categories for the RFP, one is a reduced price is a big weight. The second one is be able to deliver to every resident and business in the county. And that is really the focus on the RFP. If they don't come to the table and we don't receive proposals from that, I mean, it may be back to the drawing board. But we believe we're going to get proposals like that. The assurance that it's going to reach every location, well, I mean, I'll be the project lead on this, and we're going to give updates to all of you on a quarterly basis of what's occurring, because that's what the Board of Supervisors has asked of us. And so we would in turn give that information to you. The piece about the beauty that what we received with the schools is while we're under a contract, and in this case with Sparklight, when we had issues, it was easy to go to the top, right? So if a neighborhood is down, it was a lot easier for us to go to a vice president of Sparklight rather than get on customer service. I mean, there's just a little bit more of a direct line that was provided through it because we're under a contract.
So you've got 18 months from the time of the award to complete this whole project. Is that correct?
That's we're saying 2 years, but 18 months would cover Prescott in those areas that we showed on the map here.
And the county's picking up 80% of the cost.
That's correct.
So if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't get completed, if I know you've got a lot of reporting requirements. My understanding is the county actually is going to have to put on almost 2 full-time employees to manage these reports, make sure that they're properly submitted on time and not subject to any penalties. So what happens if you don't meet those deadlines? And what would happen to us if you didn't meet the deadlines?
Well, we don't. Do you know a lot of the ARPA requirements?
Corey Christians, County Librarian. I'm working on this project too. One of the things that's important to note is that we did put directly in the RFP that any company that puts in for this project has to have a bond to cover the entire cost of the project. So if they fail to perform, we'll just get that money back. And unfortunately, depending on the timing of that, we may not be able to put it back in, but that's assuming that they fail and they're unable to do what they're required to do. If we do have adequate time, we just put it back out, maybe select a different vendor. Otherwise, we just give the money back. No muss, no fuss, so to speak.
Sounds way too simple for the federal government in my experience.
Amen.
Thanks.
Other questions, comments from the council? Public comment?
No, Mayor.
Thank you, Stan. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dan.
Let's move on to item B, please.
Introduction of new victim services, emotional support, and facility K-9.
Geez, Stan.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Thank you, Matt.
It's minimized on there for you, Bonnie.
Hey, okay, there we go. Maybe.
Yes,
Oh,
yes, whatever it is. We should have started with this, Stan.
well, right. So, who doesn't want a really good, nice feeling story? So I'm very excited to be here today to talk with you about that. Amy Bonney, police chief, and I have with me one of 3 Amy's that work at the police department currently. Myself, this is Amy Fillingham. She's our senior victim advocate. And really, Amy was the spearhead to this exciting program that we're going to talk to you a little bit about today and answer any questions that you have. But yeah, we're here about a new addition to the police department that will be coming first quarter of next year, so early 2022. And so what happened with this project was several years ago, we started seeing a trend in public safety and in victim services, particularly with the use of therapy dogs in helping victims of crime not only recover from their crime, but also being a real active part in the process through the use of emotional support dogs. And so Amy and I kind of started talking about it. We're both dog people, and we thought, well, how great would this program be? Let's do some research into it. And so we started looking at it and figured we could take a crack at it in the next couple of years, and that it really would help us to meet our vision of being a leader in our industry, because no agencies within at least this half of Yavapai County have a full-time emotional support animal. So there are some in the Verde that have volunteers that come in with emotional support dogs, but nobody has one full-time. So, however, we had the opportunity through some partnership with the Department of Public Safety to bring this to you earlier. And so I want to just talk a little bit about why we think that this is important. It's scientifically proven that the presence of dogs that are well-trained, definitely not my dogs at home, so well-trained, professionally trained dogs are useful in work settings, but particularly with victims of crime and people that are impacted by some of the things that we see on a daily basis. It helps reduce their stress levels, manage depression, and then just foster some overall well-being, mood, comfort, and overall mindset. And really, when we're talking about victims of crime in particular, we know that they're much more able to provide us with thorough accounting of what happened to them, not only during follow-up interviews, but also during court testimony. So really helps us to enhance our service to victims of crime community and also our staff. I don't want to leave them out because it really is our intention to focus the utilization of this dog. I'll talk to you a little bit about the specific dog with victims of crime, but also in our community. So schools, assisted living facilities, special events. We know that children read better aloud when they have dogs there to sit next to them. So we have all sorts of opportunities to use this dog in an outreach setting, but also with our staff. So Department of Public Safety was really cutting edge in using this program, and they have dogs that they take out to crime scenes that they use in their interviews. However, they have dogs that just are in their stations, facility dogs that work with the sex crimes detectives, that work with the detectives that investigate homicides. And what they've really found is that it helps alleviate the stress and enhances their ability to continue to work on these high stress and high demand areas of investigations. So this is Eden. And that's actually her. That was the very first picture that we saw of her. So I'll tell you a little bit about how this happened. First of all, she is named for DPS Trooper Tyler Edenhofer, who was killed on the line of duty on July 25th of 2018. And so we're going to keep her name and honor him and his service. But the Arizona Department of Public Safety had already purchased Eden and her brother, whose name is Captain, and they had planned on implementing them in the same timeline as we are. However, they did not have the ability to staff and care for her, and so they started looking for agencies around the state that were interested in taking on the dogs. And so we got a call, and they said, well, you can pick if you want, and we'll give her to you. And I said, well, what does that mean? And what does that entail? And they said, well, we've paid for her. We've also paid for all of her training and all of her certifications. And so what that equates to is the fact that they purchased her from a reputable breeder who specializes in the breeding of therapy dogs. She is a golden doodle. And they also paid for her training, which is extensive. So she's living with a certified trainer in Peoria right now who runs Dog Training US and is going to teach her and certify her, and then also come up here and teach our handler, Amy, who will be our full-time handler with Eden, and that was all covered under this gift from the Arizona Department of Public Safety. So we thought, well, let's do this. So good timing there. She'll be certified for the use in all facilities that we have, including courtrooms and hospitals and assisted living facilities as well. And this is one of those things, we talk a lot about technology that we have. We have our body cameras, we have our tasers, we have our drones, all of those things. This is a real low-tech, low-cost solution to a problem that we have, and that's just how do we reach those victims and how do we enhance our ability to really help them move through the court system and also successfully prosecute suspects. So that's what we anticipate her doing with us. So court testimony, Amy is going to be working with our judges and our court system here to ensure that wherever she is needed, she is welcome in the courts. She will be trained. Her presence will help ease the anxiety of victims, particularly children that might be called to testify during trials, either where they're a victim or they're a witness to a crime. And then, as I mentioned before, around facilities, and we'll bring her to City Hall. Please. Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about the financial impact, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. And before I get to that, just so you know, on the second page of the council memo, there's a thank you spell check. It's not unfitted on the vehicle, it's upfitted on the vehicle. So in case there are any questions about that. Yes. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Amy just said she's $15,000. So yeah, that's the actual price tag on the cost of her and the training. Thank you, Amy, for that. So donated by the Department of Public Safety. Her ongoing care, we anticipate, will be primarily funded through community donations, which is why we wanted to come talk to you and present this to you before we actually have her so that we can start going out and building those community partnerships. We have those already established for the use of our two existing canines, our drug dogs. So, for example, we've got Olson's Grain that donates food, and Olson's has already stepped up to offer that support for Eden as well. So we've got that in place. But community donations are really what we anticipate using as a vast majority of funding for this program. And I can tell you, based on this community, I firmly believe they're going to be fully supportive of this. The other things that are not covered by donations, we will just roll into our budget for next year when we allocate those budgetary needs for gas or ongoing training throughout the years for our handlers. So I don't anticipate this to be a giant hit in any way, shape, or form. I think it's going to be something that is very beneficial for our community as well as for our police department. So I am happy to answer any questions or show you some more pictures if you want. We'll bring her back when we do get her.
I got a question.
Thank you, Chief. Councilman Blair?
Who's taking care of the dog?
She's
Is it your house?
she will be with Amy full time, and Amy, as our senior victim advocate, responds to calls for service that we need her to go out on. She also sits with victims and helps them navigate the court process and the restitution process. Both victims that are involved in the justice system, but also those that aren't quite ready yet to make reports.
I know how important those are. And really, it's kind of interesting. My sister-in-law is a nurse at Riverside Hospital, and she's got a golden doodle named Tipper that does the same intervention, very close to what you're doing, but from the hospital medic side of it. So it does make a huge difference. Thank you.
Councilmember Roosing.
Thank you. I would just like to make a comment that it's very impressive how our community comes together and supports our canine programs, and I would just like to thank them and also thank Olson Grain for their support too.
Yeah.
Councilman Sishka.
Thank you. Well, this is really exciting. I know dogs. And either Amy can answer this, but what kind of training goes into Eden and for how long? And, just how does she react to the training and how old is she now?
So she is about 6 months old right now. Okay. So I'll take a stab at it and then you can fill in the gaps. So she is learning things, not only just the basic sit, come, stay, but she's learning things like how to sit and be just still for hours at a time. Because we know if we take her into court, she's going to need to be under the witness stand, just still, where somebody can just maybe put their hand on her head. She's learning how to put a paw up on somebody's lap if they want a paw. She's learning how to crawl because sometimes victims are intimidated by a dog that might come at them. So she's learning all of those things. She's learning basic obedience. She's learning how to respond to different calls for different behavior and activity, and just learning how to be an overall good support partner.
Good citizen.
Yeah, good citizen.
She'll also be exposed to gunfire.
Okay.
Yikes.
She'll also be exposed to gunfire. She's going to be exposed to helicopters landing. If we had a mass casualty, heaven forbid, situation that occurred in our city or even in our county that Chief allowed me to respond to, she will already have exposure to standing on the side of the freeway with cars whizzing by, lights and sirens, vehicles running code. She just about 2.5 weeks ago, she graduated to where she was now being taken outside of her training facility, which is a beautiful home in Peoria. And she's going to the shopping malls, and she's going to grocery stores, and she's going to the movie theater, and she's going everywhere. There is no restrictions on her because they don't want at any point for her to react in a scared fashion or to back up. They want her to be comfortable to walk in and sit with wherever she's guided. And Chief had covered everything correctly. It's the only thing was it's called touch therapy, where she puts a paw on a knee or puts a head on a lap. So she's working her way through those things. We could see her as early as December, but it's all depending on her training and what's going to spook her now that she's getting out into the big world out there. So that's why we're anticipating early in the springtime. About 10 months is where they're hoping that she'll be ready to go.
So we're going to be dealing with some really stressful issues. Do you think you can bring her by, kind of sit her behind here?
Yes, sir. The only criteria is, especially with an emotional support animal, she can only work 12 hours. So she's not like our bomb dogs. She's not like our bite dogs or our drug sniffers, where they can work her for extended 12 hours. comes, she's done. She's got to go home and decompress because what she's taking on is totally different than what the other dogs do. So she actually needs a safe space where she can go home and relax. So, but I will absolutely be bringing her by, and I know Chief is probably going to grab her and bring her by and introduce her to all of you before I get the chance. So
I want her every day from 8 to 4.
Can you bring
My new suite and my new
Can you
office.
bring her by Olson's?
No more 12-hour council meetings. Yeah. So.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you. This is very exciting and super cool. I have a special place in my heart for service animals. I raised a guide dog for the blind in high school. And I highly recommend Pick of the Litter on Disney Plus if you want to see what goes into raising service animals. It's really impressive. And dogs are mind-blowing in what they can do and what they can understand and how they can emotionally connect to humans and how smart and intelligent they are. So I'm super excited about this program. Congratulations. This is a huge just honor for us to be able to be on the cutting edge of this type of service animal and using them every day. So kudos to you guys. This is super cool.
Thank you. We're glad you feel that way.
yes,
It would be awkward to give her back.
could you give that face back?
Other questions, comments from the council? Public comment?
No, Mayor.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Let's go to item C, please.
Presentation of decision in order of assured water supply number 86-401501.0001, modification application, part 2 of 2.
Leslie, where are your puppy pictures?
No, what was I thinking? Next time I'll have puppy pictures. She's darling. Is it at the bottom? No, up here? We're getting there. Thanks for your patience. Okay, we're ready to launch. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Leslie Grazer with Public Works. I'm the Water Resource Project Manager. Today, we're in part 2 of 2, and I wanted to let you know we do have some support on the phone today. The consulting team is a little bit different than last time that you saw. Actually, you didn't see them, you just were able to hear them. But Mr. Mike Pierce from Gamage and Burnham is on the phone to help with any questions today. And then our lead today is actually Matrix New World Consulting. So the principal geologist, hydrogeologist, Bill Greenslade, is on the phone. And he is actually, when I look back through some of our records at the city here in 1996, he was writing this aspect of the city's assured water supply, the physical availability. So we're pleased to have him on the team and here with us today. We also have the senior hydrogeologist and modeler for the project, Elizabeth Mora, and also a senior hydrogeologist, Dylan Easthouse, who works in town here as well and has supported the city in many different projects. Okay, so for today, we're going to run through those application requirements quickly. We'll do a brief review of what you saw last time and where we're at on final demand estimates. There'll be an introduction to physical availability requirements, so you know why we're looking at this and what it entails. And then we'll turn it over to the modeling group, Matrix, to walk you through how the project has happened over time and where we stand now. And then I'll be back to the next step at the very end. So here's the list. I'm not going to read the whole thing because you've seen it before, but it's an application that has many components. I will touch on the demand estimates again, but we're really focusing on physical availability today. Okay, so as you recall, on the 26th of October, Herb Dishlip, he is the consultant to the city on this aspect of the project. He was showing you a range in which the city was working in, and so it's now nailed down, and this is what it looks like. Just for reference again, so you're aware, we've talked, I think, plenty of times about current committed and projected demand. But how that really rolls out again, for current demand, that's based on your 2020 annual water withdrawal and use report. So what your city staff, the operations department of utilities has gathered and then has been assimilated into the final report back to the department is basically your base. And then your committed demands, you probably recall it, and eventually need to be broken down into 7 distinct categories. So, and those are, not limited to, but examples are you have recorded IGAs. So Chino Valley Irrigation District, you entered into an agreement with the town of Chino Valley. You have Stringfield Ranch. Those are going into the committed block. A settlement is also committed. And any contracts you have for non-potable water. So the consultant had to kind of sift through these again because we're having to build this picture of city water supplies based on the assured water supply rules. So we'll go into detail, I guess, a little bit more on that a little bit later. And then the projected demand, what is likely to occur. So with the support of the Community Development Department, their recommendation was 450 new accounts per year was a reasonable and conservative estimate for growth. And this is going to be associated with AED North and South and portions of Deep Well Ranch and Granite Dells Estates. And why I say portions related to those two is some of those are already being captured in current demand. So as you can see, if we don't cut this pie up correctly, it's not going to go back together in a full picture. So we have to make sure everybody's seated where they need to be, based on if they're already connected to the city, they have a final plat and will be connected to the city, or they're projected because they have a contract and they're just not at a platting stage yet. Okay. So this is important. This information was important because if we didn't have this really finalized, it's an input that's required into the model. So the modeling team needed to know that we had settled out on our decisions on what the demand would look like, and then they can start applying it. Okay, physical availability. So this is just exactly how it reads on the application. It's a comprehensive hydrologic study that must be submitted with the application unless, and we don't meet any of those, the department has adopted a substantive policy statement to provide the guidelines. So the modeling team, the folks from Matrix who are writing the hydrologic report are following this requirement that's provided by the state. It lists out what's needed. So this is an important step for the city because the last time they looked at physical availability was their 1999 decision and order. So that was your first one. You needed to have your physical availability discussion within there. Mr. Bill Greenslade was part of the team who prepared that for the city. Then we went into a modified DNO where you have to update these things over time. So 2005, the city felt that they were generally meeting all their demands with the water that was available in the DNO. So they forewent the study. And then in 2007 is when things were getting active with the Big Chino. And the city felt, city leadership, elected body felt it was important to get that water supply into the DNO. And that's when you went back. So those other two steps, you didn't have this review that you're seeing today of the physical availability. You solely had in 2007 bringing in a big new supply, Big Chino Water Ranch, into your legal document. So at this point, I'll just put the next pretty picture up for a moment. When we had discussions in this project, we've been working on this for a year now, basically, as we hit December. We've had an ongoing question about how does overdraft, the question really was, how does overdraft fit into this DNO application? So I wrote up a brief statement for the sake of time, because this can really go so many different ways and can become, I think, confusing because of the details involved. So Herb Dishlip had presented in the past at several different venues here at the city. The question came up and he said, when we get to the modeling, that's when we'll be able to discuss this a little bit more. So that's why I'm doing that today. So let's look back at this. ADWR defines overdraft as a term signifying that more groundwater is being pumped than the amount of water naturally or incidentally recharged to the aquifer. So incidental recharge, that term was used basically for putting treated wastewater or surface water back into the ground. Next, ADW defines safe yield as a management goal which attempts to achieve and thereafter maintain a long-term balance between the annual amount of groundwater withdrawn in the AMA and the amount of natural and artificial recharge in the AMA. So I'm restating these definitions so that we all start on the same page, because I've seen this time and time again where one person has a different understanding than somebody else. And so those are definitions directly from the state. So to begin to answer this question, let's look at this at the big picture level and also at the level of the City of Prescott's application itself. So for the big picture, in 2006, an article was produced by the University of Arizona Water Resources Research Center when the Assured Water Supplies rules were basically revised. And it stated, the linchpin to reducing groundwater overdraft in the active management areas is the Assured Water Supply rules. It further stated that the Assured Water Supply rules are of critical importance, explaining that new municipal demands be met with renewable water supplies, either directly or through groundwater replenishment. So groundwater replenishment, recharge, and recovery. Okay, for me, looking at this for so many years in this field, this business, and now tracking the current efforts of the Department of Water Resources, the Assured Water Supply rules, they're not perfect, but what is, right? Nor have they fixed overdraft. But they have placed many communities in better conditions than if the rules had not been in place. So I think anybody who knows law and natural systems, you can't always align them perfectly. So these Assured Water Supply rules are important. And this DNO is part of why we call ourselves a designated water provider. It's very similar. Was granted by the Arizona Department of Water Resources in 1999, and then again in 2005, and then again in 2009. So I'm showing you that there's consistency in your actions. There's consistency within the documents that require the city to go back, and the city goes and engages in these things for a long-term supply. Today's presentation is for the purpose of filing the required update to the city's decision order of Assured Water Supply. There are some key items related to the update. So if we look at this figure here, the last time this was presented on the 26th, we were looking at arrows coming off saying this is roughly what's going to change, this is roughly what's going to change. Overall, the groundwater block, we're looking at probably about a 500 acre-foot increase there. And so why I bring this up is because we're not looking to pump a whole lot more. There's going to be some additions, but the city's carrying itself following these Assured Water Supplies through having these alternative supplies, these blocks here. And then future, another block of water that's waiting in the wings. So the city has made previous efforts to engage in renewable supplies, getting those into their decision and order, and also into their physical operations. So improving your operations at using your surface water. If you can improve that, maximize it, and make it more efficient, it goes hand in hand. You can't just have it in your portfolio. You have to be exercising it properly out in the field. The city acquired and incorporated in their previous DNO an additional supply, and this is the Big Chino, like I just mentioned, and it's to support the area when it's deemed necessary. So you have been walking this path for quite a while. So last, I understand I will not be able to answer all the questions on these complex issues today because of time, and they are complex. So today, let's go ahead and move forward with seeing the progress on the groundwater flow modeling, which ties these demands that I showed you within the Prescott AMA, which also includes our neighbors in Chino Valley, Prescott Valley, Dewey-Humboldt, to the physical supplies as depicted in the ADWR's recently updated computer modeling process, which is a groundwater flow model, which takes me to this slide. So when we talk models, it gets very confusing because there's lots of different models out there. Excuse me, you've seen this picture before, and what we want to get at is, this is a block diagram, and this is what we're trying to look at. When we place demands on this aquifer, how does it behave? The way you look at it is mathematically with a groundwater flow model, and basically it's broken up into grids, either in all dimensions, 3 dimensions. We're going to be tracking this grid on top through the coming slides, and I hope that helps you get your orientation. So I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth Mora with Matrix New World. She's going to walk through the slides that have you'll be seeing, the next 8, and we'll be happy to answer questions along the way. So please don't hesitate if you have a question, something doesn't look familiar. So I'll turn this over to you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me and Matrix and the team. I'm going to be introducing the groundwater flow model and what we are implementing to determine the physical availability for the city's assured water supply. We are using a groundwater flow mod flow model that was developed by the Arizona Department of Water Resources originally in the 90s. The model has been updated several times since and simulates water level and the aquifer system in the Prescott Active Management Area from the 1940s all the way through to present day. The models are built with different properties in the model. So the properties in the model are aquifer properties to demonstrate how transmissive the layers are in the aquifer. And that data comes from field testing. It also comes from drill logs at the time when wells are drilled, and a geologist is out there and characterizing what the subsurface materials are. That's where these models are developed based on actual data. Other data in the model are boundary conditions, they're called. So for instance, in the northern part of this model, there is a northerly flow of groundwater out of the Little Chino subbasin, which is the upper part of this model grid. So water flows north out of the model to an adjacent subbasin. The other subbasin in this model is south over by Prescott Valley, which is the upper Agua Fria subbasin. So even though this is a model that is developed for the Prescott Active Management Area, AMA, it incorporates 2 different subbasins, which both of those subbasins and the model are outside of the actual area where Prescott is. So Prescott is southwest of the active model area in Hard Rock area. So this model is constructed where the aquifer materials are, which goes all the way from north of Chino Valley down to south of Dewey. So, oh, sorry, Leslie, if you can go back. So recently, actually over the summer, a brand new version of the model was released by Arizona Department of Water Resources. It's the new 2021 PRAMA model, which is the Prescott AMA. And so we are utilizing that model and updating it and then building onto that model to simulate 100 years into the future, which starts in the year 2021 in the model. So we're able to look at all of the components of the model in the historical period through 2019, 2020, and then what's committed for the future. So that's where the committed demands come in, and it's mostly the groundwater pumping that's simulated in the model. Okay, go to the next slide. So the model comprises 2 aquifer layers. On the left panel, so this figure here is taken straight from ADWR and one of their reports. So I don't want to focus on the actual numbers in here, but just kind of the overall picture that this is conveying, and I'll step you through that. So the panel on the left is the layer 1 of the model. So that's the upper alluvial layer. It's the unconsolidated clays and sands and gravels and the different alluvial fill, the materials, soils, and things that are in the earth in the upper layer. And then the lower layer, which is on the right, in the Prescott AMA, is actually a volcanic unit. So it's fractured in a lot of areas, fractured basalt, and it can be very, very productive. And that's where a lot of the water exists and lies in this area, is in that lower volcanic unit, and you can see those warm blue and purple colors where the black circles are. So the warm blue and purple colors are where the aquifer material is very transmissive, and there's a lot of water that they're able to pump out of the aquifer. The circles are where the city of Prescott has their 2 well fields. So they have, that's okay. They have the northern circle in the town of Chino Valley is the city of Prescott's Chino Valley well field. And the southern circle is the city's airport well field. So those are the 2 well fields that we'll zoom in on here on the next slide. Well, this slide gives you kind of more of a picture of what's going on in those layers. The schematic on the left is kind of a cartoon schematic that shows you how water flows and moves through the aquifer. So if you can imagine on the left side of the green, so the green boundaries on the right panel are the subbasin boundaries. So that's kind of where the hard rock is, on the left side where Williamson Valley is. So you can see the water would flow kind of away from the mountains. It gets into the aquifer, and then it flows to the east toward different pumping centers and different wells. And then water also flows north out of the town of Chino Valley. And this is the lower volcanic unit. So these are just showing you the direction that the aquifer water levels move in that aquifer in that lower layer. And also you can see in the upper Agua Fria subbasin that the model grid kind of pinches out, or it gets really, really narrow in one area. And there's actually a groundwater divide there. Groundwater flows south from there down and exits past Huey, the Humboldt area. And north of that divide, the water flows north. So there's kind of a divide that happens over in that area. So the left schematic shows you how water will move away from mountains. It recharges into the aquifer, gets into the ground, and then moves through the aquifer and flows in certain directions. And the 2 different layers or aquifers in the model can have different directions of groundwater flow depending on their aquifer properties and maybe pumping that is occurring or recharge that's occurring in the system at different locations. This is showing you the, are we on the city of Prescott slide? Okay, here, Leslie.
I apologize, Elizabeth. This is a really jumpy.
No,
let me see if we missed something here. It just
so you just see wells in the model. Here we go.
Okay.
So this is to give you an idea of what's in the model currently. The satellite image on the right in the background shows you an area of where the Prescott active management area is, and then where the model grid is. So you can see all of those squares. The model grid is a 1/2 mile by 1/2 mile. And so you can see where that model is relative to different features, the roads, and there's some waterways on here and things. Also, what's shown on this map are all of the wells that are in the model. So there are 8 existing wells for the city of Prescott. They pump 5 wells in the Chino Valley, or the Chino well field, and 3 wells are down in the airport area. There is 1 future well, and I'll show you that in the next slide, in the airport area. There's also the town of Chino Valley pumping and town of Prescott Valley pumping. All those wells are in the model. There's about 30 for Prescott Valley and about 11 wells in Chino Valley. Also, what's in the model are other non-exempt wells that are not tied to municipal committed demands or current demands, but things like agricultural wells or any wells that pump more than about 35 gallons per minute. They're considered non-exempt, and that's a designation of a well type that the Arizona Department of Water Resources assigns. If a well pumps more than 35 gallons a minute, it's permitted for that. So there's about 330 of those types of wells in the model. And then we have all of the exempt wells. So those are domestic wells, stock wells, different wells on people's properties that they're pumping less than 35 gallons per minute. And there is almost 7,000 exempt wells in the model. So all of these wells work together in these model simulations that we're running, and they're all pumping and they're all being simulated in the model layers that they're actually yielding water from and constructed in. So the next slide, we're going to look a little bit closer at just the City of Prescott wells. So you can see here that the 5 wells in the Chino Valley area are the existing 5 wells that the city has. Those wells have been there for a long time, some since the 40s, and they pump anywhere from about 650 to over 3,000 gallons per minute. That historically was the water supply for the city. And now we also have the airport wells that are down to the south by the airport. There's also the city has a recharge facility that's in the yellow polygons that they add treated effluent and surface water into that facility to recharge water back into the ground. So that's where that safe harbor, the meeting the management goal comes in, where they're adding water into the ground, and then they have wells within 1 mile of that facility that are going to be pumping water out. So it's kind of balancing that water that is going to be pumped to meet the demands for the city. The wells in the airport area are newer, and their pumping rates range from about 1,000 to almost 2,500 gallons per minute. Also, actually, I wanted to point out, if you can go back, Leslie. So there's 3 existing wells, the airport 2, 3, and 5. And then there's 1 future well that is going to be, the plan is to have it designed next year and drilled the year after, and that'll be Airport 6. The wells, the Airport 5 and 6 locations are a pretty good area to have wells over there. They've proven to be very successful wells, and that can pump a good amount of water without having a lot of impacts. So within the model, and just looking at any demands that are tied to existing assured water supply determinations, so that can be certificates of assured water supply analysis or designation, like the city has. There's all of these different assured water supply wells that are in the model that are simulating to pump the water from tied to an existing issued assured water supply. There's about a little over 20,000 acre feet per year of committed demands in the Prescott AMA model, and about 9,600 of that is tied to the city's existing DNO. So in these model runs or simulations, all the wells in the model pumped, as we already talked about, but these wells are, we have to make sure that none of these wells are losing pumping, and that also that the water levels don't go deeper than 1,000 feet below land surface, if that's available in the aquifer.
Sorry.
Also, actually, Leslie, if you can go back to the assured water supply slide, there's also, recently we were just notified just a couple weeks ago from ADWR that there's a new analysis that we need to add up in the Chino Valley area. So, you know, the work on this model is, like I said, it was the recent model was just released this past summer in late June, and we're still working with it, and we're looking at building that 100-year assured water supply and adding in all the committed demands, and even this new committed demand with an analysis in the Chino Valley area that we were just notified on. So all of this is an ongoing process, and a work in progress. This is showing you some preliminary results from what we're calling just a base model. So this is showing you the results from all of the current and committed demands that are on the books now. So all of the issued demands. This is a map showing the projected preliminary results of water levels. And you can kind of follow your eyes so that you can see that the flow direction is really similar to what we looked at before, where it had the arrows on there. The flow direction is pretty much the same at the end of the 100 years, where water is flowing away from the mountains and toward the center through Chino Valley and then up north into the where the subbasin boundary is adjacent to a nearby subbasin boundary. And then in the southern part of the model, you can see where the blue area is, and that's kind of a high right there, where the groundwater divide is, and then water flows north from there and south from there as well. So you can see that divide is very evident in these colors that are shown here on the map. So in a part of the modeling work that we're doing for the designation and DNO, we will provide maps like this that show the groundwater levels at the end of the 100 years, the drawdown of the water levels through time through that 100 years, the depth from the land surface to the water table, and the saturated thickness that is remaining at the end of the 100 years after we complete the modeling. We are compiling a hydrology report that will summarize the physical availability portion of the DNO. That will include the modeling and the modeling results and the setup. There will be an executive summary in there that will kind of bring everything together, and someone just wants to read the first couple pages and get a summary of everything that was done and characterizing the physical availability. We are using the demands that were developed by the WORM model that Herb Dishlip has put together, and I believe that was part one of the series of talk for the DNO. That is, those values are being added into the model and into the simulation for the city's new DNO. In the hydrology report, we will have sections characterizing the aquifers and the evaluation of the hydrogeologic setting, any water level data, and looking at bringing the model up to the current day and how we projected it into the future for the 100 years and the impacts of that model simulation and the model run. So once the hydrology report is completed and reviewed, then it is submitted to ADWR. And once that happens, it kicks into an administrative completeness review process. There's 150 days, that's the licensing time frame that the state has to review and issue the DNO. From experience, the state usually has comments, and the way that they convey those comments to the applicants is through a process, a notices of deficiency process, where they will submit a letter outlining all of the questions and things that they want us to maybe look at or explain further. And so when that happens, when they give us a notice of deficiency, the licensing time frame stops, and that 150-day clock stops until we reply. There's a 60-day limit to reply to that. And once you resubmit your answers to their questions, then their licensing time frame starts again. The clock starts ticking and away from those original 150 days. If there are any model changes that are required based off of the comments from the notice of deficiency, then likely there could be a second notice of deficiency just to finalize all the inputs and all the analysis and everything incorporated with the hydrology report. So after this, the application is considered complete and correct, And then there's a public notice time period and hearings potentially. So we always strive to prepare the best product that we can convey, and to the best of our abilities. But it's usually just standard operating that we receive the notice of deficiencies, and that's just, I believe that is pretty much for 100% of the applications submitted. 100% of them get at least one notice of deficiency. So we will do our best to get back to the state and complete the application to correctness.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. You've now been modeled. So now you've been through the entire process. So we can take any questions. If something came up on one of the slides, I'll try to get it to that slide, not have it roll past it. Or if you're ready to move on to the last slide, we can do that as well.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. Questions, comments from the council? Councilmember Rusing?
I didn't see this presentation in our packet.
I was told to submit it on Friday, so I did. So I don't know where it goes from there. I apologize if we can make it readily available, though. It's okay. Electronically available.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, ma'am.
Other questions, comments from the council?
Is there a chance we could go back a couple of slides? There's an acronym that I wasn't familiar with.
Yes, sir. I'll try to
per second, something
land
like
on the right one.
There we go. Right
okay.
There. Yes, simulated 100-year water level. And tell me, feet, AMSL stands for?
Above
mean sea level.
Okay. Very good. So that, gotcha. That would, above mean sea level. Excellent. Thank you. And you'll share this presentation with us?
Absolutely, sir. Yeah, I apologize. It wasn't in your hands.
Nope, thank you. This is great. Good information.
Other questions, comments from the council? Public comment?
I do have one hand up in the Zoom call. Mr. Krupnik, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, just looking at the schedule, this 150 days, let's just say the first chapter of that. Does that mean that we, the public, don't really get to see the report till after ADWR, in this 30-day public review? Do we get to see it before the 30-day review starts?
Elizabeth, are you able to help us with that one? When the public
I believe that in terms of anything that's submitted to ADWR, when it's submitted, it's now public information. And so anybody can go in and request the information through their public information request portal on the website. So I know that that's definitely available at any time.
Okay, so they should put it up on their portal.
Well, there's a form to fill out. So if you go to their website, you can fill out a form and request it, and then they would email you a PDF or send you a OneDrive. Yeah.
Will there be notice given when that submittal first occurs?
I know it will be announced by the city, by staff will provide leadership when that is finally filed. But we know that won't be any later than December 31st of this year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other public comment?
No, Mayor.
Councilmember Rusing?
Thank you. That's a very good point, is public access to this information, especially since taxpayers' funds were used to fund this study. Is there any way when it's appropriate that we could put this on the City of Prescott website so it's easily available without a request for information or filling out any forms?
I can cross-check that with our legal department if we can go ahead and put the files up on the website. I think the caution that I would add there is that if we do get a notice of deficiency, we're going to be changing things and responding to the department again. So once it is deemed complete and correct, then we have a product that people can dig into. But before then, I'm concerned that if there's something they want more information on, or they'll see previous numbers not final. But let me verify with the legal department.
Okay, good point. Thank you.
All right.
Mayor,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Leslie, I'd like to second that opportunity to make that available. We can always designate it as a preliminary application or submission subject to modification.
Yep.
But I would not like to see the public have to go through the public information request process. I think it should be readily available. We should post it, and the community, if they're interested, can review it.
Okay, we'll do our work on this side and see where the posting makes sense, and anything that we have to redact. There wouldn't be anything data-wise. It would be, I don't know, information that we would be asked to redact of personal nature, I guess.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie. Appreciate it.
That's it. We'll see you on November 23rd with a resolution to submit.
Okay, thank
you.
you. This meeting is adjourned.